The Cathedral of San Gimignano, il Duomo, dedicated to Mary, Our Lady of the Assumption, is situated in its namesake piazza at the top of a large staircase. Construction began around the year 1000. In 1148, the church was consecrated in the presence of Pope Eugenius III on his return to Rome along the Via Francigena. The original church faced the opposite direction than the church today, as seen by the remains of the earlier apse visible near the church's counter facade. This change in orientation is possibly attributed to the Francigena, which passes through the Piazza del Duomo. In this way, it was easily accessible to pilgrims, travelers, and merchants. In 1460, the church was enlarged by Giuliano da Maiano, an architect in the Florentine school. He was the brother of Benedetto da Maiano, who himself worked on the decoration of the cathedral. The simple Romanesque facade, done in travertine, comes from the 13th century. In 1239, work was finished on the facade, under the direction of Matteo di Brunzimede, considered the main architect of the period. There are two portals on the front of the church, leading to the left and the right aisles. In the middle, there is no central door that opens into the nave, since he wanted to leave original apse unharmed, which could be found on the internal side of the facade. At the center of the facade, high up, is the large ocular window decorated with a motif of rounded leaves. On the sides, there are small circular windows above the doors. The entrance to the church is along the left side, through the loggia of the baptistry, a small Romanesque cloister. The baptismal font, dated 1379, is signed by the sculptor Giovanni di Cecco, also known as Giovannino della Pietra, the master builder of the Opera del Duomo of Siena. On the back wall is the fresco, The Annunciation, dated 1482 by San Gimignano-born painter Sebastiano Mainardi, brother-in-law and collaborator of Ghirlandaio. In addition to the central figures, the Annunciated, the Annunciate Angel, and the Holy Spirit depicted as a dove, the painter included some domestic details. The inside of the church is a basilica plan, subdivided into 3 naves, the central being higher than the 2 side aisles. The walls of the nave were entirely frescoed in the 14th century, with 2 important cycles that narrate the Old and New Testaments. The counter facade is also completely decorated by frescoes and enriched by a remarkable group of wooden sculptures. During the restorations of 1951, some remains of the original building were found, which show the medieval apse near the counter facade, in the opposite direction of the current church. At the center, unfolding like a large tapestry, is a fresco signed and dated 1465 by Benezzo Gazzoli. The work depicts the martyrdom of Saint Sebastian, with Jesus displaying his stigmata, Mary, and the glory of angels. On either side of the counter facade are the Annunciate Angel and the Virgin Mary, splendid wooden sculptures carved by the Sienese artist Jacopo della Quercia between 1421 and 1426, and which are still in their original location. At their bases, the statues are dated 1426 and signed not only by the artist that excellently sculpted them, but also by the painter Martino di Bartolomeo, who painted them with bright colors and decorated their garments with gilded hems. Today, Di Bartolo, the late Gothic Sienese painter, is the artist of one of the most renowned frescoes in the church. It depicts Inferno, dominated by the figure of Satan, with Judas in his mouth and in his hands Brutus and Cassius. The iconography is inspired by Dante's Inferno, Canto 34. The conspirators Brutus and Cassius are considered by Dante not just traitors of Caesar, but of the empire as a whole, just as Judas is within Christianity. In Tadeo's Inferno, there are various circles in which the damned are subject to punishments according to the law of contrapasso, a punishment befitting of the crime. One can see, for example, a group of gluttons that surround a set table, held back by the horrific demons that impede them from approaching the food. In the left aisle are frescoes with stories of the Old Testament, painted in 1367 by the Sienese artist Bartolo di Fredi. The cycle unfolds across 3 levels, the highest being made up of a series of lunettes. The episodes can be read starting from the first lunette closest to the counter facade, proceeding along the aisle. They continue onto the second level, starting once again from the entrance, and conclude on the third level, painted in the same direction. In the lunettes, the episodes are inspired by the creation of the world and of man, as described in Genesis. 10 stories from the Old Testament wind through the second register, among which are scenes relative to the Great Flood, also coming from Genesis. The first episode shows the construction of the ark, followed by the animals entering the ark, in which Noah makes his own family enter, as well as each animal species, as ordered by God. Next, we have Noah, his family, and the animals exiting the ark, so that every fertile species could procreate on earth. The stories dedicated to Joseph follow. The favorite son of Jacob, he is the last of 11 brothers, whom nurture a strong jealousy of him. The young Joseph often recounted his dreams to his brothers, who saw that their father loved him more than all his children, and so they hated him. In the first scene, Joseph is sleeping in his bed, adorned by an elegant yellow checkered blanket. Next to him, 2 of his dreams are represented. The dream about sheaves in the field, which bow down before the largest sheaf in the center, and the dream about the celestial bodies, who all together bow down in the presence of Joseph. Above, in the night sky, the sun and the moon are in fact shown together. The biblical story continues onto the third register, with the stories of Moses and the Israelites. The crossing of the Red Sea, the largest fresco compared to the others, is one of the most admired scenes in the cycle. The wall in the right aisle is entirely covered by a famous series of frescoes portraying stories of the New Testament, painted between 1338 and 1345 by Lippo Memmi, with help from his brother Tederigo. Lippo, active in the first half of the 14th century, was the brother-in-law and pupil of Simone Martini, the great painter of the 14th century Siena school. The frescoes, on the basis of misleading statements by Lorenzo Ghiberti and Giorgio Vasari, were attributed for years to an imaginary artist named Barna, who, as written in Vasari's Lives, died after falling from scaffolding while painting the frescoes in the church. The stories presented in the 6 bays of the church are distributed in 3 horizontal bands. They are read alternatively from left to right and from right to left. In the 5th bay, we have the largest scene of the whole Christological cycle, for the importance of the subject depicted. At the center, the 3 large crosses stand out, with Jesus beside the 2 thieves and surrounded by 6 sorrowful angels. According to the Gospel of John, the Roman soldier Longinus is intent on piercing the side of Christ with his lance, while another knight is breaking the legs of the impenitent thief. Above his cross, in fact, are 2 small demons that wait to steal his soul to bring it to hell. The thief on the left instead is visited by 2 angels who save his soul. Below, according to traditional iconography, the group of pious women with St. John and Mary, fainted on the ground, serve to offset the group of oppressors on the right. The chapel of St Fina, off the right aisle, is a masterpiece of Renaissance art. 3 major Florentine artists worked on it together: the architect Giuliano da Maiano, the sculptor Benedetto da Maiano, and the painter Domenico Ghirlandaio. On May 16, 1468, Giuliano da Maiano presented the model for the chapel, which was in perfect 15th century style, with an elegant composition that created a harmonious structure. The architectural decoration was executed by Giuliano's brother, Benedetto, who utilized a stupendous idea to render the environment all the more spectacular. That is, he sculpted 2 fake curtains, open and rolled back to allow visitors to see the altar. St Fina, the most beloved saint in San Gimignano, is buried under the altar, which serves also as a tomb monument. She was born in the city in 1238 to 2 disgraced nobles and died very young, at 15 years old, in 1253. She suffered from a serious illness from the age of 10 and was an example of the perfect Christian to all those who visited her. The saint's pain grew with her mother's premature death. Finally, we have the wall frescoes, painted by Ghirlandaio. To the right, entering upon the chapel, is the scene Pope St Gregory appearing to the ill St Fina to announce her death. The space is quite bare, and apart from some objects of daily life, the painter illustrated other episodes from the saint's life. In the upper left, Pope St Gregory appears before the young girl to announce her impending death. At the same time, there are violets that sprout from the oak table on which the sick girl lies. These flowers allude to a miracle that happened at her death, when the towers of San Gimignano bloomed bunches of yellow violets. Still today, on March 12th, the anniversary of her death, the flowers will blossom on the towers. The mice under the table and the bench recall the girl's suffering on the wooden table. She was martyred, in fact, by mice and worms feasting on her lesioned skin, eating her alive. Next to the saint, comforting her pain, are her nurse Beldia and the nurse's daughter Benvenuta. On the left side of the chapel, set against the backdrop of an imposing Renaissance structure, a sort of exoda, is the funeral of St Fina, in which the young girl is laid down on a bier covered by a decorated brocade. Next to the girl, the nurse Beldia receives a miracle that cured her hand of paralysis. A boy holds her foot, and thanks to the miraculous intervention of the saint, he regains his sight. Finally, a third miracle brightens the sad scene. At the moment of Fina's passing, all the bells in the city start to ring a sweet melody at the hands of angels. Among the towers on the right, the Torre Grossa, next to the Palazzo del Podesta, is easily recognizable.